Hey everyone, Carl here with Literate Lessons, bringing you a deep dive featuring Palkia and Zacian. Palkia and Zacian were the other duo to win our poll like a week and a half ago now, almost 2 weeks ago actually. Um, and this fun pairing is a nice breath of fresh air in comparison to most of what we've been talking about, where these kind of bulky, slow, kind of methodical teams have been kind of popular. This is definitely on the other end of the spectrum in terms of what it's trying to do. But before we get into all that, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. It helps us out a ton. Our poll, I believe, for this week will be for 2 weeks from now. If I'm doing that math correctly, I can't remember. This week's been crazy for me, so I'm just all sorts of lost. But it should be up on our Twitter at LR Lessons if you want to go vote in it. It'll come out here soon in the coming weeks. And if you're looking for Series 12 events to play, we are hosting our first Little Root Lessons qualifier on Saturday. That's going to be a link in our to our Discords in the description down below. You can go follow that there and do all that. So we've talked about Zacian a lot. Zacian obviously is one of the best Pokemon we've seen to grace the VGC format in a very long time. Really insane attack stat, really great speed, really good typing in Fairy and Steel. This is a very powerful defensive and offensive typing all wrapped up in one. Has great coverage with like fighting and other random stuff like that. Like I think you have Wild Charge as coverage, you have like Fire Fang if you want that. Fighting coverage obviously with Sacred Sword and or close combat. So the possibilities really are endless for Zacian, but we all know it as the very offensive, very fast, dealing damage kind of Pokemon. And that really doesn't change too much when it comes to being paired with certain Pokemon. What this thing does best is just puts pressure on your opponent to try and answer it while your other Pokemon either get set up or kind of try to do their thing. We know this set is probably the standard bulk set right now. You can see a few variations from the set where we're running more HP and more attack and less speed and kind of play with that number a little bit. But most of the time, you're going to see these fairly bulky, fairly fast Zacian sets trying to just deal as much damage as possible. Nowadays, though, we've kind of gravitated away from the substitute close combat Sacred Sword sets, and we're to start playing double stab Swords Dance Protect, or double stab Substitute Protect. Sometimes you see like Wild Charge, sometimes you do keep that fighting move on there in that last slot, but most of the time you're playing Behemoth Blade, Play Rough, trying to just hit as much damage as possible. Having that fairy coverage added on there is kind of a needed thing, as we talk about Palkia here in a second. But overall, Zacian's just really, really strong still. I wouldn't expect these sets to change too terribly much from what they are now. Fairy coverage is just very powerful. On the flip side of that, Palkia kind of is the bulky offensive attacker we have paired with our Zacian. While our Zacian can't Dynamax, this thing can, utilizing those very good defenses and that decent HP to get the most out of a Dynamax. Nothing to scoff at here. That base 150 special attack is huge. Base 100 defense, base 120 special defense means that we can Dynamax and we can take 3-4 hits from most Pokemon outside of opposing maxes. And something cool that Palkia gets to do is that telepathy ability. Many people may not know what that does. You ignore your own partner's damage. So say like Earthquake, Discharge, Surf, stuff of that nature. You get to ignore that essentially because your Pokemon are psychic and whatnot. It's kind of this clever way of just like having cool pairings alongside a Landorus or alongside like Rodon with like Discharge, stuff like that. Looking at movesets, Palkia stays fairly offensive as well, and I would define these pairing as a very hyper-aggressive format. What I mean by that is you're trying to put a lot of pressure on your opponent and just deal damage over and over, click the damaging move every time. You're not really wanting to play super duper passive like a Veladon team wants to. You're not making a whole lot of crazy pivots trying to get into the right position. You're expecting to make a very powerful lead with this thing and just pray it works out most of the time. This set is really cool. That base 100 speed gets you to 145 at 196, which unfortunately speed ties Venusaur. So if you're wanting to pair this thing with Tailwind, I would recommend bumping that speed up one more point. Where you're going to get that point, I'm not exactly sure. I believe, if I remember correctly, this defensive investment means that you survive a +1 play rough in Dynamax. What I do know, however, is that 156 investment in a special attack means that your Max Quake KOs any bulky Zacian sitting across from you every time. That's one of the great things about Palkia, is that it just is able to deal with the Zacian so well. Because you are that water dragon typing, you only have to fear Play Rough. And before we were doing the double restricted thing, that's what Palkia was good at, was being that anti-Zacian answer on your team that could just walk out, hit it with a Max Quake, blow it up, the job is done. Nowadays, though, it's a little bit tougher. You have to watch out for Play Rough, and that's where the rest of the team comes into play in trying to help facilitate that game plan. So I wanted to talk a little bit about team building with Palkia and Zacian, and just kind of show you how to probably fill this team out. This duo overall is very offensive in nature. You're looking to deal as much damage as possible early on, try to win within the first few turns of the game, or at least get into a position where you can max safely and take over the game that way. A lot of good tools for this duo are things like Intimidate, which you can get from like Incineroar or Landorus. Both do really well. Palkia struggles against some ice types. Incineroar and Zacian kind of help cover that base pretty well. Probably could do like safety goggles with Throat Chop. This is probably my favorite tech right now for Incin, is running Throat Chop. Mainly due to the fact that there's just so much parting shot. Like, if Incin is so popular, running something to stop opposing Incins from doing their thing is always just good. You could probably just do like basic EVs here, and then enough speed to where you're getting to a decent break point. And probably do Impish, something like that. Other things that help out with this team, you have a Dynamax target in Palkia. Having a secondary target, though, outside of Palkia is probably a good idea. Palkia, obviously being Water Dragon, is only really weak to Fairy and Dragon. You have Zacian to cover that Fairy and that Dragon weakness for the most part. But having a strong physical max option is always good. So if you're not into Incineroar, you could always do like Landorus. Landorus is a great option for mainly just like looking at trying to find just like a good max target that doesn't really need a whole lot of help. Overall, I think Landorus is still fine in this format, even though we're seeing it less and less, just as teams kind of bulk up a little bit more. I think that it's still a fine option. You just have to play it the right way. Let's get these moves in here real quick. So I prefer the Swords Dance and No Protect sets. You could probably run a little bit bulky. You want to get to 149. So there's a cool thing that at 149 you will so if you get to +1, you will outspeed Calyrex Shadow every time, because you don't worry about Regieleki with this thing. Like, you don't care that Regieleki's sitting across the field from Landorus. The big speed check you have to make is that Calyrex Shadow. And so you can probably run a little bit bulky, get some good defense EVs in. Probably just need to do that and that. Something like that's probably fine. Like this trio right here of Palkia, Zacian, and Landorus is just a real good core. And beyond that, like I said, you can run Double Intimidate if that's something you're scared of. Palkia and Zacian really struggle against opposing Zacians, so Double Intimidate isn't a terrible idea. And so looking through this team and like kind of coming up with ideas. This was something I found on Victory Road VGC and as a rental code for Paste, and I think this is really good. It's got the Double Intimidate. You have a Moongus to kind of help as redirecting to keep Palkia safe. Regieleki's great speed control. This is a very hyper offense aggressive team that I would definitely suggest like playing and picking up. Link to the Paste will be in the description down below if you want to pick it up and play with it. This is not my team, but this is something that I tested around with trying to get ready for this video, and I think this team is very good. So that begs the question, why is this duo so good? To answer that question, we kind of have to look at what makes the duo tick, and the key thing here is just overwhelming aggression. Being able to output offensive pressure the way these two do, it means that it puts your opponent on the back foot. You have to really commit to a strategy to beating Palkia and to beating Zacian because they just do their things so well that if you falter or make a weird decision or kind of stray away from what makes that what your plan is, essentially, your opponent's going to be able to pick that up and throw it right back at you. Like I mentioned, Palkia covers a lot of Zacian's weaknesses. Zacian's weak to ground and fire. Palkia covers those weaknesses very, very well. Palkia is weak to Fairy and Steel. Well, guess what covers those weaknesses? Not Steel, Fairy and Dragon, and guess what covers that really well? Zacian. It's like a match made in heaven. It reminds me a little bit of the like Kingdra, Zacian, Rain teams we saw early on in Series 8. Being able to pair that Kingdra with that Zacian meant that you have a good Dynamax targeting Kingdra and a decent backup plan if that falls through in Zacian. Palkia and Zacian kind of do the same thing. You're not forced to max your Palkia, and you get to play with your team comps a little bit more. Your opponent has to focus on beating your team, whereas you can kind of experiment playing with the Palkia Zacian lead. Find things you like, find things that you're weak against, and kind of just slot puzzle pieces in instead of having to play the good Pokemon that go with your strategy, like Yveltal, where you have to play Venusaur Charizard to really get that 1-2 punch from the sun, because Yveltal can't quite carry the team like a Zacian can. And that overall is like the big reason why this duo is so good, and kind of why we're starting to see it pop up in popularity. The formats really appreciate hyper aggressive teams. Finding the best hyper aggressive team has been like the goal leading up to the start of Series 12, and I think we've found it in Lightsaber. And with that being said, I want to thank y'all for hanging out and listening to me ramble about Lightsaber this week. This pairing is really, really fun, and I've thought about it, and I'm glad I kind of added some of the new things that I've had time to plan out in my head. I like being able to sit there and talk team building strategies. I like being able to sit there and play games for you and kind of show off stuff like that. Make sure to check us out on Twitter at LR Lessons to go vote in the poll. Make sure to check out our personal Twitters at Mr. Missouri25 and myself at MusicalVGC. Make sure to check out our Discord, link in the description down below. If you want to come and hang out with us, talk VGC, talk Pokemon Legends Arceus, play in our next Series 12 event, all of that can be found there on the Discord. And remember to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. And we will see you all next week with the next deep dive. Bye, everyone.